Teens. Hello, Daisy.
Hello. Hi, Sheila. It's a pleasure to be on your show, despite the very frightening circumstances.
Yes.
A long-time listener and fan of yours and your approach and sensitivity on this and many other issues. I'm a Jewish woman in my 40s. I've got 2 teenage boys, and we are so incredibly worried as a family about rising anti-Semitism that we are seriously thinking that we're going to have to leave the country, and the only place we feel we could go to is Israel, because everywhere else feels so unsafe, and we don't even have any connections to the country. We've got no family, no friends there really, but we just feel so unsafe. And I don't want to go into the details because I don't want anything to be prejudiced, but as a family we've had to go to the police twice in the last month because of anti-Semitism directed at us directly within our community. I've had to get a video doorbell. I now carry a personal alarm. The threat feels like it's in your face the entire time and you can't escape from it, and all we hear are words from politicians. We don't get any actual actions. All they say is there's no place for it, but there clearly is a place for it.
Well, on that, the government has put a great deal of money into extra security for Jewish communities, Jewish sites, Jewish events. So that is an action that it's taken. But importantly, and I know many of the Jewish people that I speak to on this programme and off it actually, say that's good and it's welcome given the heated environment that we live in at the moment, but we can't live behind walls and security cordons. And so we absolutely have to do more.
I totally agree. We've got to go upstream and stop it. We can't just keep building bigger and bigger walls.
And in your mind, what does that look like, going upstream and stopping it?
I think we need really good education on anti-Semitism in schools and in universities. We need education in the workplace. I myself work in the inclusion space, and I don't want to give too many details, yet there is this sense that Jews don't count within inclusion. The anti-Semitic tropes are believed that Jews are white and privileged and powerful and rich and control the world and all these things. So even trying to get within inclusion and anti-racism spaces people to take anti-Semitism seriously is extremely hard.
Let me read this to you. It's come through from Martin, a listener. He says, Sheila, perhaps if Netanyahu stopped massacring Gazans, Lebanese and defenceless Iranian people, they, whoever they are, I think he means the attackers, will stop attacking Jewish people. Seems obvious to me, says Martin, with an exclamation mark at the end. There you have it. There you have it.
That sums it up, doesn't it? People holding Jewish people, I mean, never mind the fact that he's completely misunderstood what is going on and that Israel is fighting against terrorists who have sent thousands of bombs their way and are constantly trying to massacre them, and that Israel is actually being defensive in what it's doing and trying to protect itself, leaving that whole conversation to one side.
But even there, we can still keep our minds open and assess what the Israeli government does on this or that. You know, we should do it with every country, and Israel included. But there is a special reversal of that for people who hate Israel, isn't there? They give themselves permission to reverse that normal sort of slice of reason and just say, yes, but if it's Israel, then we can attack Jews, we can berate Jews, we can make Jews feel uncomfortable. It's just bizarre.
But they're not able to, these sorts of people aren't able to separate the idea that it's possible to support the existence of Israel and the fact that the Jews, like every other people in the world, deserve to have self-determination and self-defense with the current actions of the Israeli government, whatever you think of them, and then they turn it on people ordinary far Jews away from Israel who have ordinary Jews.
Out doing their shopping in North London,
Yeah, or, you know, me in my hometown, or my son just going about his daily business, getting screamed at in the street. Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry that's happening to you. I'm not surprised, Daisy, to hear that that's happening to you, but I am sorry that it is. Thank you very much indeed. I'm all right, thank you. Yes, you are a Jewish man.
I am, and I've just actually driven past the scene, which is horrific, and obviously there's a lot of police activity. But I think, aside from what Gideon just said, one of the key things that needs to happen is the media needs to get on side and educate the public. Not across the board, whether it's about the difference between Israel and your belief in Israel as a Zionist or being Jewish, Netanyahu's politics, which is completely abhorrent, in my view, and totally separate to anyone being Jewish, living a normal life in this country. And the fact that, again, Gideon had mentioned, if you belong to a synagogue, you often pay a membership fee. Most of that goes on security. And on top of that, and the synagogue that I belong to, every Friday, every Saturday, there are 5 different volunteer members of the community putting their lives on the line to stand outside and protect a synagogue. You don't see that when you go to church. You don't even see that when you go to pray at a mosque. How has that in itself not, sparked the government into action? But equally, the media.
But also, Dan, let's not forget, yes, a new permissiveness of hatred of Jews has happened over the last 2.5 years. But you know better than me. You had those locked gates. You had that security at your schools and your synagogues before then.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, one of the difficulties, or one of the rise in the recent level of anti-Semitism has been to do with the actions of Israel and Gaza, which again is abhorrent, but it's been linked to being Jewish, as opposed to the opportunity for the media, from the BBC to the Guardian to the Telegraph, all press and radio, to actually use this as an opportunity to educate the public about the differences.
Yeah, and I've certainly been doing that myself over the last few years, and there's a long way to go, and not just about Israel and not just about Jewish history, but we all need to be very mindful of one another's history and exactly what we need to share with each other. Calls and your thoughts on that key question, I think, from here on in, which is, what are we going to do to stamp out Jew hate in this country? Because you know, I have spoken to you about it many times already. The pattern is here to see. The permissiveness was obvious for a couple of years now. The permissiveness about things people could say and direct towards British Jews simply because of their views, of your own, the attackers' views on Israel or Benjamin Netanyahu or any other members of the Israeli government. Of course, that's completely allowable. Of course, you can say what you like about the Israeli government and its actions, but you can't automatically conflate those actions. Whether you're right or wrong, you can't automatically conflate your view of those actions with your neighbours in this country. It's got to an incredibly sorry state of affairs, and it can't be ignored any longer. Chief Rabbi Sir Ephraim Mervis has said this: words of condemnation are no longer sufficient. He's right, and called for meaningful action following the stabbing of 2 Jewish men in North London. Let's talk to Mark in Manchester. Hello, Mark.
Hi, good afternoon, Sheila.
I know you are Chief Executive of the Jewish Representative Council in Greater Manchester, aren't you?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I'm 24 hours on from attending a commemoration service at my synagogue, Eaton Park. It was obviously targeted in a deadly terrorist attack on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, where my friends and family had to endure an appalling incident. Yesterday, the First Lady of Israel, the President's wife, was there to lead a commemoration service for Adrian Dolby and Melvin Kravitz, who obviously both lost their lives on October the 2nd. And now, less than 24 hours on, we're faced with this appalling news that once again, Jewish people who are British, living in the UK, being targeted on our streets in a deadly rampage. And what you said repeatedly, Sheila, is absolutely correct. And I once again echo the sentiment of the Chief Rabbi that words are no longer sufficient. Growing up, I was often told about how Jews should never think about anything other than tolerated in a society. And I always thought that was a heart to the past and the appalling history of Jews being persecuted, because growing up, I never really had to experience anti-Semitism. But what we have endured over the last 2.5 years since the 7th of October 2023 was inconceivable before that date. We have had to endure rank hypocrisy, outright betrayal. And our history has taught us that when Jews are under pressure and targeted in this way, there is often silence. And once again, we've seen deadly terrorist attacks targeting Jewish people, our buildings and our charities facing arson attacks, and the anti-racist left largely completely silent. So what is it going to take for these people to show us solidarity and support?
Well, I mean, you know, you can also look to elements of the left, and I stress elements of the left, who are themselves racist towards Jews, without question, and are fomenting this kind of stuff.
I mean, that's absolutely correct. And many of the callers this afternoon have referenced the hate marches that are taking place on a weekly basis on our streets. And I remember...
They call them pro-Palestinian marches in support of people who are still in extreme difficulties, aren't they, in Gaza, because of the war?
Absolutely. And look, there's a legitimate point they can make, but what is not legitimate is when the Jewish community asked the march in Manchester 2 days after a terrorist attack where 2 British Jews were murdered to postpone that march for a week, so the police could focus their resources on reassuring our community, and we were told unequivocally that march would be going ahead. That is unforgivable. So if you go on these marches where people chant or hold signs to globalise Intifada, you don't get to morally absolve yourself when the Intifada is globalised, ultimately resulting in British Jews being targeted and murdered on our streets.
When we talk about action beyond the words, the tweets, the posting on X after these attacks, even beyond the extra financial support that has been given to Jewish organisations, Jewish community, locations, certain Jewish sites and buildings, because that is practical action and support, isn't it? But beyond that, what are we going to do to bring back into the fold, and by the fold I just mean normal society where you do not approve of this or turn a blind eye to this? How do we bring people back into that fold who've fallen out of it? That's my big question, because it's very easy for them to fall out of the fold, but much harder to get them back in.
Look, you're absolutely correct. It's deeply distressing when I go to my synagogue now and I see the level of security provision that's in place. And whilst we're grateful to government for the money to enforce our security, you can't build walls around Golders Green High Street. You know, we cannot be expected to live our lives behind higher walls and install more CCTV cameras, because people have spoken about our dignity in the immediate aftermath of Eaton Park and these arson attacks. We're not leading dignified lives. So what we need is firm and decisive action about what it is that is radicalising people who are living here in the United Kingdom as part of a allegedly cohesive society to want to go and target Jewish people who are living their lives. Now, this is happening, in my view, because of a number of issues. One is around our cultural venues, and obviously LBC covered the fact that Kanye West was due to appear here in the UK, someone who's engaged in overtly egregious neo-Nazi level anti-Semitism, who the organisers of this festival thought it was completely appropriate to give him a platform to potentially speak to vulnerable and impressionable young people. In Greater Manchester, we have the Bridgewater Hall, who hosted Uncle Sheikh Al-Afasi, who again celebrated October the 7th and engaged in overt anti-Semitism. And when we raise these issues, we've often been met with hypocrisy and outright betrayal. Because what we need to do is find a way to stop individuals being radicalised in their homes to target Jewish people here in the UK. There's no complexity around these attacks. People don't just wake up one morning and want to pick up a knife and go and just stab Jewish people on the street.
No,
we need to get to the bottom of what is happening.
No. Thank you very much, Mark, for speaking to us today. That's Mark in Manchester. Sam has called from Hello Dov.
Hi, Sheila. Thank you so much for what you just said, really.
Well, you're welcome. It's the least I can do.
I mean, and I do believe there are so many good people out there.
I do.
I was out walking with my wife last summer in a park in Rickmansworth. You know, I'm a Jewish man with the kippah, the hat on my head, and 2 young ladies decided to tell us as we were walking past that we should get back into the gas ovens. And it was actually a...
What age were they, would you guess?
They were young. They were actually, and what made it even more actually sad and shocking is that one was pushing a baby in a pram. They were like 22, maybe.
Yeah.
And it was actually a lady walking. I kind of said to myself, did they just say what I? And it was a non-Jewish lady walking past that said yes, that was, and she was, so upset and appalled about what happened. And by the time I turned around, they kind of disappeared. But just, you're so right, Sheila, and I want to just say thank you as well, for what you stand for and what you're saying. And it's so heartening for us. I'm here in Golders Green, literally 500 meters from where it happened this morning. And you'll excuse me for being, it's quite emotional about it because I'm 500 meters away. My kids walk there every day, every single day.
Yeah. And it's like in any of these moments, whether it's terrorist attacks or this attack, which is being investigated as a terrorist incident, or just even just a quotes ordinary murder. I know there's no such thing, but we all have a part of us that says there, but for the grace of God, go I. That's just human nature. And you're bound to be feeling that as a Jewish man with a family living in Golders Green.
Yeah, literally around the corner. So I mean, look, I've been listening to all the callers this morning and this afternoon, really, actually. Sorry, and I don't look. I could echo every single point that they're making, and I can really talk about it at length. But there's one point I really want to make. That's why I called. I don't normally call the radio, to be honest. But there was really one point I wanted to pick up, and I just wanted to say, really, it's the power of words. Yeah. And by that I mean, I'm going to speak more specifically. Like, I've listened, not to your show, Sheila, but other shows on LBC, on other radio stations, on other forms of media, where some journalists, in the words that they're choosing, the words that they're saying, I have found have been not thought out properly. And I'm just putting it out there. I understand it's hard. Broadcast journalism is tough to get it right. I think we have to encourage debate and not shut it down. But too many times I hear people stating their opinions as fact. And, it happened even on this station in LBC just a couple of months ago. One of your colleagues there, James O'Brien, where he basically stated almost, without questioning, that there was a school where, Jews are taught, to hate. And there was just it wasn't questioned because there's a normalization and we have to be so careful. We've got a situation now where... Can
I just say, I mean, sure. Again, I can't speak for James, of course, I wouldn't even attempt to, or for anybody else, but I know that angered a lot of people. He did address it, and I can tell you, because I see him in action, on air and off air, he gives a great deal of thought to what he says and does. And, all of us can get things wrong. I've got things badly wrong in broadcasting as well, and I would say that about him and about just those moments, and to resolve anything as big as this, we all have to be able to get it wrong. I've had loads of conversations with friends of mine and some colleagues and callers who think I've got things very badly wrong since October the 7th. They think I disregard the pain of Gazans, the pain of Palestinians. I don't believe that I do that because I know that I give it a great deal of thought and try to educate myself as best I can. But we've got to let people say how they're trying to make sense of all of this. But that cannot ever include it cannot ever include a situation where we just sit on our hands when anti-Semitic attacks happen. And that's really what I want to talk about today. Lucy in Watford, hi.
Oh, hi, Sheila. Thanks for taking my call. First of all, I just want to reiterate what all the callers have said today. So thank you for taking a lot of time to discuss this today. Because as the Jewish community here, we are completely traumatised with what is actually going on. I mean, 18 months ago, my daughter and her boyfriend were attacked in London. Why? Because her boyfriend's visibly Jewish. It did go to court. They were prosecuted and everything. But the shock of my daughter calling me from London to tell me what had happened was like, where am I living? How could this happen? In the place that I was born, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, it's just beyond belief. Last week, I went to a Yom Ha'atzmaut celebration, which is Israel Independence Day celebration in London, in a theatre Rob Rinder was hosting. The security there was like nothing you've ever seen. There were literally 10s, 20 police vans, police everywhere. This is how we have to go around in London now. Our children, as many of your callers said, go to school behind gates with guards. Our babies in kindergarten have to practice terrorist attacks. It's called evacuation, where they have to hide in case their nurseries are infiltrated. So when Wes Streeting says today, an attack on Jews is an attack on us all. No, it isn't, because your children don't go to school like that. You don't go to your churches and mosques with these security. I went to my synagogue Tuesday night, last night. I have to go through a thick gate. That gate closes behind. Then I go to another door that opens. I don't feel safe here anymore. Wednesday night when I was in London at this thing, when we walked to the car, I was looking behind me all the time, waiting for somebody to jump up and stab me or attack me. And as Jews, we don't want to always be thought of as the people that survived the Holocaust. There's so much more for being Jewish.
I know, but there are important lessons in the years before the Holocaust that I think we are now living.
Yeah, they are. But, Israel is demonised, has double standards applied to it, is delegitimised every day. Part of this celebration last week was to celebrate the Technion, which is a university which has been in Israel and pre-Israel for 100 years. The innovation that comes out of Israel, if our kids, we're failing our kids in the education system because our kids are being educated through TikTok, through YouTube, through anything that people want to put out, anything that's on there they believe, which is not true. If they spent time in schools looking at the innovation of Israel and what Israel has actually given back to the world, a country that was born out of the ashes of the Holocaust, the worst genocide in the history of humanity, the Jews didn't want to take revenge on the world. No, they built something that they live, that they share with Christians and Muslims, because as you know, Sheila, there are 2 million Muslims that live as Israeli citizens as Israel, so that quashes the apartheid, fantasy. But our kids now have an anti-Israel cult, walking around in the cafes and joining in with the, globalise the Intifada. It's like the new trend. And there's no education around what that actually means.
Well, we need to, kids, outside of school, obviously they can wear whatever they like, but the teachers and the parents absolutely have to educate them about how they relate to their fellow citizen. You can think whatever you like. There's not much you or I can do about that, Lucy, but we can put laws in place and social norms in place and really put these hateful people, and I don't include confused children in that, but you put these hateful people who want to foment this bad feeling and spread it to people, including children. We've got to work out how to put them back beyond the pale, because that's where they belong. It's 3:32. Let's get some headlines first from Matt Hewitt.